Today, we are time traveling back to the 90s, back to simpler times, if you will. And we are going to be talking about a company and a toy line that vanished from the face of the earth. What you see in front of you is two figures from a line that did not get its due because this company fell apart. In today's episode, we are talking about the Trendmasters Gamma line. Yes, strap in because we're going to be doing some unboxing from a very, very old and very obscure toy line. Now I know some of you who are watching were not around in the 90s, and believe me, that makes me feel old as hell. In the 90s, you were limited to what you can get kaiju-wise here in the States. Japan, whole different deal. We got next to nothing. If you wanted something Godzilla, you either had to go to a comic shop or a toy convention of some sort, and hopefully someone had connections in Japan and were shipping figures over, and you paid an exorbitant price for those secondhand Bandai figures. Well, a company looked around and said, you know what? We think this Godzilla guy is marketable. And that company turned out to be Trendmasters. Now, Trendmasters was a fairly decent-sized toy company back in the early to mid-90s. They kind of came and went. Their peak would be around 93 to about 99, 2000. Or if you were a kid back in those days, Trendmasters made some fun stuff. They had Voltron, they had War Planets, they made those figures for that now forgotten Lost in Space movie. They did a lot of cool things, but they were the ones that saw potential in Godzilla when no one else, other than maybe Dark Horse, was willing to take a bet on this big goofy dinosaur monster. They put out a large line of Godzilla figures. Now here's the kicker. You've probably seen Trendmaster Godzilla figures out there, and if you know anyone between 35 and 45, those are held in such high regard to that era because for a lot of us, those were the only toys you can get. I mean, I remember walking through Target and the first time seeing these guys on display and losing my little mind, begging my mom to buy the whole line. And she said, no, you get to buy one. So for the next few years, all I got for Christmas was Trendmaster figures, and I loved them. They were not, they weren't the most screen accurate, but they gave you all the heavy hitters. They gave you Rodan, Ghidorah, Mothra, even Batra, Mechagodzilla. They were all there. And they were cool. They were stylized, though. They were very much American toys. They had that American toy aesthetic. They were almost kind of He-Man-ish with a comic book kind of twang to them. And that's because the people designing them, well, where they worked in the comic industry. But they were fun. They were awesome. You got a lot of cool figures that, again, no one else would bat an eye at. Not like today, where you have Playmates and you have Bandai finally bringing this stuff over to American shores. But back then, pickings were slim. So we all love these things that love Godzilla. Now, Trendmasters got pretty big for a minute. They were doing well. And a little movie called Godzilla was being produced by TriStar. And at the time, that was being propped as one of the biggest movies to be ever made. And then we all watched the movie, and we realized, oh, it's not exactly Godzilla. It's not what we were hoping for. And Trendmasters put all of their money behind that Godzilla line. Turned out to be a Damocles sword that came down on them and really hurt their business. I mean, the line did not sell as well as they had hoped, partially because there's only one monster. It's Godzilla, and there's only so many ways that you can make a Godzilla figure, and believe me, Trendmasters did their damn best to do that. Well, while that was going on, they were still producing standard Godzilla figures, and there was a whole line that was being prepped to be released called Godzilla Doom Island that was going to feature characters like Destroya and Spiga and a proper Anguirus that pretty much were put on hold. And at the same time, Gamma was picking up steam in Japan. And Trendmasters looked at them like, well, we're doing pretty good with Godzilla. Why don't we give this Gamma guy a shot? And thus, here we are today, looking at this line that was meant to be on store shelves, and to be fair, actually did make their way to some store shelves, depending on who you talk to. Trendmasters thought we could replicate Godzilla's success with Gamera. He's got a fairly good roster of characters, and they produced a whole line based on the Showa figures, though. We did not get any of the modern Heisei characters like, well, we did get a Gauss, but we didn't get the modern Gauss. We didn't get Legion, we didn't get Iris. Instead, we got Gamera, Zigra, Gauss, Gurion, Viras, and Jiger. Those are what we were given. And I say that very loosely because we technically weren't even given that. As Trendmasters was falling apart, they had all these figures ready to go. Word is, according to some people, some of these figures did make their way to store shelves, mostly KB Toys. So before they collapsed, stuff got out. But they had to offload a lot of this product another way, and you gotta remember, 1998, 1999, the internet was not what it is today. And they took a gamble on online ordering. You gotta remember, Amazon was barely in its infancy, and this whole selling stuff through the internet was brand new. You could order these things and they would be sent to you, and you run the risk of putting your credit card when there was no protections. So it's kind of like skiing without a helmet. So a lot of these made their way to pretty much wholesale dealers who then slowly sold them off at conventions, and they went at somewhat of a upscaled price. Now those who managed to find them at certain KBs, well, they got lucky and picked up the whole line. Today we're looking at two that I managed to secure from Comic-Con 2000. Yes, 24 years ago. These were part of my collection for the longest time. They got put away in storage, and well, as you can see here, when I found them in storage, the boxes are not in their best shape. This isn't a Toy Story 2 situation. Let's open them up and let's show those who weren't around what Trendmasters had to offer. So there were two types of figures you can get. Mind you, same figure, but one came in a pretty much an open box like this, and there was a carded figure. Exact same figure, but with one different detail is that the box figures were sound. Now, obviously, this is nearly a 26, 27-year-old figure. The battery has long died, and I've not replaced it. But they would make roars, much like their Godzilla counterparts. When these were displayed, you go to the store, they're right there, you can push the button on them, they roar, and that would entice kids like, Mom, I gotta have it, take it home. When I bought this, it had the roar working, but sadly, long gone. So, this is back in the day when packaging was all the rage. As you can see, they used the modern Heisei Gamera, even though it is not exactly what they were going for, because this is all Showa era, but this is what Trendmasters did. They were a nice remix of designs. They were not exactly one-to-one to their movie counterparts, but they were stylized because you had to sell the toy. And, selling a toy based on a janky looking suit was a little hard. Instead, you get buff Gurion. So let's pop this bad boy open and we'll take a look. And while we're at it, we're going to open up Viras too. I'm not going to bore you with the opening. Alright, after a lot of fussing and feuding with the boxes, I have set them free after being imposed for nearly 30 years in their cardboard prison. So here we have Gurion and Viras in the Trendmaster style. So as I mentioned before, these are stylized figures. As you can tell, you can tell that's Gurion, but that's not the Gurion that was in the movie. Mostly because a suit figure is going to look a little janky, especially to kids in the 90s. Like, come on. So you had to buff them up a little bit. You had to give them a little character. I'm not saying that the original suits did not have character, but these have some character to them. As you can see, Gurion looks like he's been doing nothing but leg day all day, every day. He's got this cool green paint job to him, as Had to be done in the 90s. You have to be flashy. So there's the button that makes him roar. Obviously the battery's dead, but this is what we bought in the 90s. This is a standard action figure, and he's pretty cool. Now, much like every 90s action figure, there had to be something cool that they had to do, which I give you Gurion's blade. Improvised by giving us this. So you just put it in there. Shazam. And then, where was it at? So there's a little flicker right there in the back of the head. Yeah, look at that. That is how we played with toys back in the day. Now you have Viras. It's pretty much a big squid. So how do you make a squid interesting? Well, you make him look more evil than he looked in the movie. So the problem with this figure is you have to make a squid into an action figure. Now the suit had 2 legs for the actor to stand in, and then there were the 2 arms, and then they just had the flippy floppy trundles on the other side. So when you watch that movie, pretty much the guy in the suit's just twirling around, flopping around at the poor guy in the Gamma suit. This has a little bit of character to it. As you can see, they've added some ridges. They gave him the cool white eyes. So here's where his sound would happen, but he just made like a chirp. Because he's an action figure, he can articulate left and right. All the trundles do move, but these are pretty stiff. So the body is a hard plastic. These bracing legs, which look nothing like the rest, so they stand like that. So he stands kind of awkwardly, but these don't move. The front and back tentacle do move, but they move in like a weird clockwise direction, where what would be the arm tentacles move back and forth. So that is what you got. He has no actual action movement. There's no projectiles or anything on this guy, but he's bigger than Gurion. So again, when you're dealing with toy design in the 90s, you know, you're basing it on the kids are going to be doing this. Like literally, that's how we all played with our toys back then. This is a kind of a lost treasure, if you will. As I said in the opening of this, these figures were meant to go out to stores. Unfortunately, Trendmasters filed for bankruptcy not long after this line was announced. The figures that were made were either sold off online or made it to select retailers, and that was pretty much it. The only way you can get these now is via eBay or some toy store that managed to buy someone else's collection. But amongst Trendmasters fans, these Gammas were like holy grails for a window of time between 2000 and 2004. And for us kaiju fans, these represent a weird kind of lost time in this fandom, because the American Godzilla film did not set the world on fire like they thought. Japan went back to making Godzilla movies with the Millennium series, and Gamma kind of faded into obscurity for a little while. This was pretty much the only time we got Gamma represented on the American front outside of those Dark Horse comics. So they're fun figures. These are action figures. These are toys. They are meant for children. And, you know, I kind of love them. So I wanted to share a little piece of history with you guys with this episode, and I hope I've done just that. And that's going to wrap up this episode. Remember, if you like what you see, we do have a show. It's called The Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. You can find us at thekaijukingdompodcast.com, along with our sister show, Common Kaisers. And if you don't like to download, we are also on all of your favorite podcast streamers, including Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you find better podcasts. We're also on social media. You can find us on X at The Kaiju Kingdom, Instagram at The Kaiju Kingdom, and Facebook.com/The Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. And that'll do it for this edition of the Koffers. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.